morning, everyone. Welcome to this Secura webinar on the maritime industry. Today, the title of our webinar is Charting the Course, Navigating the Maritime Cybersecurity. Thank you for being here. Allow me to thank also my guest that is here with me today, Anna Prudnikova, Team Manager of Cybersecurity Certification. Hello, Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Today, we are going to explore a domain in relation to cybersecurity, such as the maritime industry, an industry that is going through a lot of changing. Digitalization is bringing us into a new domain within the industry that requires new solution, new education, and consequently, new certifications. At Secura, we are a company that now exists for more than 23 years here in the Netherlands. We have a 150 plus member group divided into expert into the cybersecurity domain, engineers, technicians. They look into how cybersecurity is developing across all industries. As of 2021, Secura became part of the Bureau Veritas group. Bureau Veritas being a company that exists for more than 180 years, presence across more than 120 countries with a staff of 80,000 people. We are close to our customers, wherever our customers are. We are present in all different types of domains and provide services across all different types of certification within the various industries. In our market, we look at different aspects of what cybersecurity represents: technology, finance, public, defense, industrial, and today the product manufacturers. Our experts are informed and knowledgeable about all different types of regulations and do provide services to all different types of companies within different industries across multiple geographies. Within cybersecurity, we are able to provide support you at all phases of any certification or needs. Today, the agenda, as mentioned, is about cybersecurity in the maritime industries. So what you can see on the screen now is the agenda that we are going to be covering. And what we will be trying to do is to present you to what the different scenarios are today in the maritime and what is about to come, closing the conversation with a case study. So without any further ado, I would like to pass the word to Anna to take us through this journey. Anna.
Thank you, Antonio. Thanks for introduction. So let's just dive in. First of all, let's start with evolution of cybersecurity in maritime. How did it start? Well, we need to understand that maritime is one of the oldest industries known to man. Maritime industry is really vast, and it includes shipbuilding, maritime shipping, ports, shipbuilding supply industry, offshore wind energy, and so on. And basically, since ships deliver over 80% of the global world trade, disruptions in port and on shipping lanes, they can have really dire consequences. And the rising use of industrial control system and operational technology in ships also mean that all the risks that historically were only involved in the classical OT environments are now also present in the maritime industry. So now we are going to take a look at few threats which are really relevant for maritime, and we are going to start with the increased severity of the attacks, because there are a few new trends that's basically arising in the field. For example, that the crew and seafarers, they've been targeted by the pirates since 2020, and now we're talking about digital pirates also. Also, most of the vessels are now connected to the shore nowadays, meaning that the attacks starting from the shore can escalate to the vessels. And scary enough that in 2021, cybercrime damage reached $6 trillion. The next one, which also as a new threat, is digital complexity. So we already discussed that now industrial control systems are transferred to the maritime industry, right? And the biggest part here, especially for navigation charts and systems, they could be also compromised because they are connected to the cloud. They are connected to the onshore activities. And also automation systems, which are connected to those navigation systems, can also be controlled from the shore, meaning that attackers can also control them. Harm and reputation, of course, is a really big threat. The incident that happened at Canal de Suez claimed over 300 million of loss for just the lost reputation. And those scary cyber attacks, they do tarnish and slow down the high-tech development. And basically, what we saw so far, that all 4 of the world's largest shipping companies have now been hit by cyber attacks. But let's not forget about legal issues. In the last years, data leaks and penalties have reached over 1 billion, and they're still counting. There are also a lot of things are happening in the Coast Guard vessel cyber risk work instruction, and they now introduce the code 30, specifically talking about detainment of ships in case if those ships are deficient in some ways. And also you need to understand that in case of a cyber attack, companies are responsible of any damage and they can be sued by their employees, seafarers, passengers, and even clients. Another scary thing is fleet blackout. We need to understand that the attacks on equipment, they might impact all vessels, not only a single one, using the same brand model. And basically the attack on a ship owner might impact the whole fleet at the same time. So imagine you're not only losing one ship, but you're losing the whole fleet at the same time. And another thing, we all know that autonomous and remote control vessels is now a thing. Well, those can be easily taken by the hacker, unfortunately. Business disruption. Of course, we discussed a lot about also safety issues, but we also need to understand that basically those impacted systems can also lead to fleet management disruptions. Ransomware attacks, especially on shipping firms, they tripled between 2019 and 2020, tripled in 1 year. Logistics really heavily right now rely on onboard email system. So if just business email doesn't work, well, basically you also lose control over your ship. Time of restoration, on average, companies take about 197 days to identify and 69 days to contain a breach, according to IBM. Those are really scary numbers. Imagine like almost, well, half a year and more to just identify that you had a breach. The cost of downtime is nearly 50 times greater than the ransom that was requested. And the recovery after cyber attack is more costly than its prevention. And this is something that we are really going to focus on today, because this is really a key message that we would like to deliver, that recovery after cyber attack is more costly than its prevention. The last scary thought for now is about the cargo loss. We saw a lot of attacks on cargo management system because they do jeopardize the tracking of the containers. Imagine if you lose the whole cargo. This is a huge business impact as well. We already saw a lot of cyber attacks in there that led to the containers to pretty much disappear in ports. And also, of course, the pirated vessel sea routes and ship manifests lead to some kind of a form of a modern maritime piracy. Well, I hope I didn't scare you too much, because now I want to actually move to how we can prevent that. Luckily, well, we are not the only one who know about that. And in the world of regulations and standardization, the work has already started. So let's dive into the first cybersecurity, let's say, document that was developed, which is right now mandatory for all the companies involved in maritime industry. It was developed by International Maritime Organization in 2017, and it's called IMO Resolution 428. Basically, what this resolution does, it mandates the ship owners to consider the elements of cybersecurity in their safety management system. It's been mandatory from June 2021, It gives people the 2 years, well, the companies to implement that. And actually, right now, it can be already audited by the relevant organizations. But to top it up, because this is only talking about the risk management and only one part of cybersecurity, from 2022, there are 2 new regulations, so-called UR E26 and E27, which focus with really detailed requirements. The first one, E26, talking about the ships' networks and how to protect those, how to protect the data on the ships. E27 specifically talk about suppliers and equipment. So of course, as a ship owner, you need to secure your network, and that's where the requirements of E26 regulation come into place. But you also need to be in control of the risk coming from your suppliers, and that's where E27 comes into place. Currently, we are in implementation phase, but we need to understand that from 2024, all 3 of those regulations will be mandatory. A bit of the details. We will start with the IMO resolution. So that's where we're talking about the approval of safety management system. Now, that's been happening for a while because safety was always a focus. Now, the safety management system should take into account cyber risk management as well. In this case, we are going to talk about multiple things that needs to be taken into account, starting from assets inventory. And that's something that we already saw a lot of companies, a lot of ship owners struggling to identify what exactly is present on their ships. When you identify that, you need to continue with risk analysis. You need to think about the threats. What are the effects of those threats? What are the impacts? What is the criticality of them? Then, of course, all the ship owners should develop their own cybersecurity policy. The focus of those should be on the roles, on the rules, responsibility, the crew training, and the big focus, of course, is also on the crisis management. And the last part of this cybersecurity management should be the onboard procedures, which basically show how to implement the earlier created cybersecurity policy, monitoring, maintenance, and how to do incident response. How to implement it, because, well, we've been talking a lot about the fact that you need to do it. Well, basically, the idea is that as a ship owner, you need to go through all the previous points. Later in the presentation, we are going to give you advice, the best practice advice, how to do it. But the idea is that right now already, the flag state inspectors start to ask, okay, but did you consider cybersecurity risk in your safety management system? And you need to be prepared to say yes, and you need to show the proof that you indeed did it. So now we are going to move to 2 other regulations, which are for now only upcoming, well, but they enter into force into 6 months. The first one is E26 regulation, and it aims to ensure basically the secure integration of both operational technology and information technology equipment into the single vessel network. And it should be done during the design, during the commission, but also through the whole operational life of the ship. The idea here is to target all different key aspects of cybersecurity. Again, we are talking about equipment identification. We're talking about protection. We're talking about attack detection, response, and recovery. And again, important to understand, in 6 months from now, it will be already mandatory. So what are the requirements talking about? Network segmentation, network traffic protection, logical and physical access management, remote access control to onboard system, cyber incident detection, and restoration and resilience. And as always, we need to understand that all of those new regulations, even though it might be something new, it doesn't talk about any new cybersecurity concept. This is something that's been implemented in IT world and OT world for a long time, but it just never really escalated to a maritime sector. So that's why right now we are in the beginning phase, where a lot of ship owners and other actors involved in maritime industry, they don't know how to start. Well, good news for you, you're here now, so you will learn something new and you will know how to start your work. So another important thing to keep in mind, that whatever documentation you produce for your ships, it needs to be updated. So it's not like one time you do it. It has to be in the whole life cycle of the vessel. But what will actually change, right? So we did talk about this new regulation coming. So we did talk about, let's say, practical point of view, but what does it mean strategically? Well, there are two major things that you need to keep in mind. First of all, you need to ensure that you have your cybersecurity expertise. Again, we spoke already about that. This is a new thing in maritime industry because cybersecurity was never really considered before. And with everything, you can consider also hiring external support for that. So companies like Secura, we can always help you to build those cybersecurity expertise by training, by providing people who can support you to build those expertise internally. But it's also, of course, important for the company to hire new experts, but also to make sure that the current experts stayed on board. Another big important thing is the fact that you need to perform cybersecurity monitoring. Something that has already been done is the onshore real-time vessel monitoring, right? So you will track the vessel, you check the parameters. This is always was focusing on safety part. What you need to do now, you need to extend it towards cybersecurity. And here we are more or less talking about the classical IT monitoring, where you need to check the logs, you need to make sure that you can actually prevent the attacks from happening, because you can identify them in the early stage. The last regulation that I'm going to talk about is E27. Yeah, and this is a regulation which is talking about the equipment and the cyber resilience of equipment which is installed during the for the ship. And as I mentioned here, the idea is to basically to be in control of your supply risk. All those new devices, they need to be developed in a secure way, and they need to have some specific requirements that they comply with. So you as a ship owner, or you as a manufacturer of the equipment, need to make sure that those requirements are implemented. An interesting thing here, and we are going to talk about it later as well, that this regulation really relies a lot on IEC 62443. And IEC 62443 has been a standard in the industrial control system world for a long time now, but was never really used in maritime before. Now is a good moment to start again, because it will be mandatory from 2024.
Thank you, Anna. Allow me to jump in 1 second in the conversation here. What you brought forward is obviously the context. The maritime industry, being one of the oldest in our history, bring forward a lot of established conventions. And therefore, in established conventions, there is the change that technology is forcing upon us to don't just wait for a natural evolution, but it is the urgency of what technology brings to accelerate changes in order to catch up with what technology does. One of the consequences of technology, obviously, is cybersecurity, or exposure to cyber threats. What Anna presented us so far is the complexity of the ecosystem. Here we are not just talking about one environment, but a complexity of environment. You have the ship, you have the harbor, you have national waters, you have international waters, you have products that are brought from one continent to the other, and each one of these steps covered by technology expose the ships owners, the different geographies to threats. So as you saw how Anna was introducing us, there are a number of regulations that are brought forward, but now we are coming into a phase where those regulations are coming into practice, and time is a fundamental example. However, before we look into the time, let's look into how these changes, this regulation, are actually influencing decisions that you as ship owners or responsible for one of the elements of the ecosystem need to take into account. So Anna, question, can you give us some example, or practical example, of how Maritime is reacting to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think whatever we are going to discuss right now would be really focusing on the, let's say, applicable approach which you can take. So let's just dive in. First of all, we are talking about today and something which is already should be implemented. Well, start with risk management process, right? So this is something that we discussed in the very beginning, the IMO resolution, which mandates you to already have risk management in place. Currently, I can tell you there are multiple risk management best practices. There is no strict, let's say, requirement to choose one of them. I can give you some examples. IEC 62443-3-2 has a really good risk management process in place. ISO 27005 is also a really known IT security standard, also can be implemented. The good thing as well, if you never did risk management, those methodologies pretty much give you a step-by-step approach, and they will be compliant. But of course, you don't stop there, because also risk management is a process, so it's a continuous journey. It's not something that you do once, you identify your risk and you forget about it. No, you need to do it on a regular basis. You need to make sure whenever you introduce new equipment, new ships, you have to do it all the time. Multiple ways to do it. You can choose to do it once a year. You can choose to do it based on the changes and so on. The focus here, just start right now. Then, when you do your risk management process already correctly, you have your continuous improvement for it in place, you need to follow up and build the full cybersecurity management system, right? Because risk management is only part of it. We discussed before, a big part of cybersecurity management, yes, it is built on risk management, but there are also other things like monitoring, crisis management, but also you need to think about testing. You need to follow up with testing. You identify your risks, but you also need to see how realistic are those risks. So the threats that you identify also need to be tested to see and simulate the scenarios which attackers will try to perform. This is, let's say, a follow-up step. Once you have a control over your systems, you build your risk management, then you surround it by full cybersecurity management system. You tested everything you could. Your next step, focus on your suppliers. Because again, you introduce the equipment into your networks. You can be as much as in control as you can, but if you introduce the vulnerable equipment into your networks, you open the door for the attackers. And well, fun enough, it all fits well with the regulations as well. Well, we start implementing IMO resolution, which is already in place, and then we focus on 2 upcoming regulations. And this is just the best practice of cybersecurity. This is not something really new, but this is new for maritime, because that was never really considered before. Another thing that I would like to talk about briefly is the best practice standards. And Secura, as a company, which is a part of Bureau Veritas group, we work really closely with BV. And BV did a really good thing. They did develop the specific cybersecurity classification document for marine units, focusing really on cybersecurity requirements. So from 2023, they updated their norm, and now it's fully aligned with all the upcoming regulation. So basically, if you're not sure whether you're compliant or not, or maybe if your passengers or your clients are asking, how can you prove that you're compliant? Well, one of the ways to go is to actually receive a certificate from companies like BV, which will give assurance that you are compliant. There are multiple parts to that standard. I'm not going to go into details because that's not the goal for today, but this document is publicly available. Feel free to take a look at that. The idea here, there are different classes depending on how deep into your cybersecurity you are right now. It starts with cyber managed prepared, and this is fully in line with IMO resolution. Then it goes to cyber managed, then where we move to already being in compliance with UR E26. And then on top of that, you even move to cyber resilience. And this is something that you build on top when you're already compliant with regulations. But as I mentioned before, cybersecurity is a continuous journey. So you can always build on top. The better it is, the more safe you are. And this is just an example. So as I mentioned, one of the basic class notations is so-called cyber managed class notation. And basically, if you're compliant with that and if you get a certificate, you prove that you're compliant with IMO resolution. So we did talk a lot about compliance, right? So the question is how to reach that compliance. And again, the approach here, I would say this is not something new. If you follow up on our webinars, you'll probably recognize the similar approach that we recommend to different sectors. Of course, now we are going to tailor it to maritime, but the idea is the same. So you choose one of the best industry standards, or you can just say, well, I only focus on IMO resolution. First step, do the gap assessment. See the current state of your risk management system. Are you in compliance with IMO resolution or not? Well, I'm pretty sure you might identify some gaps. Well, after that, let's try to bring the processes in compliance. Build your processes. You identify your gaps. You clearly create the recommendation to address them. And again, this is something that can be done internally, but you can also always consider the external company to help you. Because while companies are secure, we have expertise to do that. We've been doing it for many years. And as I mentioned, yes, maritime might be a new sector, but the principles of cybersecurity are the same. We do work a lot with industrial sector, so all of the expertise that we have can be just transferred to maritime. So then we build our processes. Well, what do we do next? Well, we need to make sure that we properly implement them. And what do we mean by implementation? Well, first of all, we start, okay, we have our risk management policy in place. Well, it's not enough to just have a policy, as I mentioned. You actually need to perform your risk assessment. You need to address your risks. For that, you also need to make sure that the people are trained to do that. So that's what we mean by implementation. So this is let's say, the approach that you can take for all. IMO resolution, UR E26, any type of standard that you would like to implement. You can also do it with IEC 62443. One of the things that is not that much present on the slide, but I already briefly touched on that. IEC 62443 is a really good framework, which is implemented in industrial world for a long time now. It has multiple parts to it. One of them is risk management. Another one is cybersecurity management system. So you can take that as your framework and use it as a best practice in industrial world to bring your cybersecurity into place. So now, of course, we talked a lot about compliance, but of course, cybersecurity is not only about compliance and ticking the box. You also need to actually make sure that whatever you're doing is realistic. Normally, for that, you're doing some testing, you simulate the attacker behavior. But before you can start with simulating the attacker behavior, you start to see what are the vulnerabilities. Because for the attacker, in order to perform the successful attacks, well, they need to identify some of your vulnerabilities. So you can do the same. And again, the approach here is quite standard. You first start with aligning on the scope of your vulnerability assessment. Then you execute this vulnerability assessment. It can be done manually or automatically. We always recommend to be careful when we're talking about automatic vulnerability assessment on board. And then, of course, report on the findings and recommendation. Follow up, implement recommendations. And again, you can do it by yourself or hire an expert third party that will help you. One of the things that we do as Secura is also doing vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. And basically, penetration testing is your follow-up. So you identify vulnerabilities. Does it mean that if you have vulnerability that it's actually means that somebody will attack you and execute the attack? Well, no. For that, we developed the test plan and basically a specific test that tailors towards the vulnerabilities that we identified. We recommend two major scenarios to be executed. So first, the offensive security tests on ensure infrastructure for ship-to-shore connectivity, right? So basically, we simulate an attacker being on shore and trying to attack the ship remotely, which is a really realistic scenario if you think about it. Another big scenario that we always consider is the offensive security on the OT infrastructure of the ship. So basically, attacker being present on the ship. Again, the approach for penetration testing is typical approach that we always do for our pen testing. We align on the scope. We start with threat modeling to specifically identify the scenario that we are going to execute. So we never really randomly try to pen test. We always do the focused scenarios. And of course, we perform the penetration test. Then we report. And then, well, you need to implement the remediations.
Thank you, Anna. Allow me to jump in this section. As you noticed by the way that Anna brought you forward into these steps or practical decision that needs to be taken, is that being ready for cybersecurity is not just a tick in the box. It's not just a regulation that you need to achieve in order to be fine. Cybersecurity proves that you need to start evolving and integrating cybersecurity within the culture of your company by preventing or anticipating any cyber attack. You will actually save a lot of money on relation to branding, legal cost, and then customer loss and so forth. If you look into the example that you received from Anna across the different steps, what you will notice is that these steps are a sort of taking a picture of a moment, looking into the objective, and then start a journey together in order to reach that level that allows you and your company to build a change of culture. Consider cyber threats like a virus that is in our system or come in our system. If you're not prepared, you might end up to actually not being able to perform any activity. But if you're prepared, you might have the right means to have your organization functioning, limit the damages to whatever attack you have, but at the same time, being able to find the right anticorps that allow you to recover and get back into productivity as soon as possible. Now, Anna, we see study case on the screen. Can you please give us some more details?
Yeah, thanks, Antonio. Thanks for adding the extra details. It's always useful to wrap up what was said before because it really settles the information. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to show you quickly in the study case, not going to go into details. In 5 minutes, we are done. So one of the first projects that we did at Secura in Maritime a while back was a threat modeling for a cruise ship. It was a really interesting exercise because, well, I mean, I personally did a cruise ship in my life, so it was a fun activity to do. I never really at that point considered that it actually might be dangerous. I will consider next time, you know, I will only go on a ship that I actually did a threat modeling before. Now I know where to go. Yeah. So if you want some advice, I will give you later. Yeah. Anyway, so what was the exercise about? There were two major networks of a cruise ship. So industrial networks and the breach network. Well, the breach network is basically where everything, all the action is happening. Let's put it this way. What was our approach? So we received some high-level diagrams of the ship, but also we received a lot of pictures. of how it looks in reality, also some results of the network scanning. And of course, we also have had the workshop with the cyber team. At that point, we didn't even go on board, even though that also could have been the case. At that point, the ship was actually cruising, so it was a bit more complicated to catch it in action. But it can be done both ways. Actually, the fact that we had the pictures and the diagrams was already enough. And what we did, we used the standard approach that we use for threat modeling called STRIDE. I'm not going to go into details about that. If you're interested, we also have information about that on the website. Some examples of the threats, there were way more. I'm just going to focus on a few examples here. So what we discovered, that the most interconnected system in the network was HVAC system, which was quite interesting because that from the safety perspective, that's one of the major systems because, well, that's how people get in the air, making sure that it's all clean and so on. Imagine this is the most interconnected system. So a lot of the threats were identified at that level because basically it was using the wireless interface towards the wired network, which was hosting this HVAC equipment. And we also identified that basically this wireless network was using the old WPA2 pre-shared key as a security type, which is now not considered secure anymore. So there are some threats here identified. I'm not going to read through them. Maybe you can check later. The idea was that basically people were an attacker who is on the ship and knows a bit about the system can actually break this key, get access to the network, and then in this case get a full control over the HVAC system, right? I mean, I'm not going to tell you about the damage scenario in this case. If you can take over the whole HVAC system, a lot of things can go bad. And there are different scenarios here, how it can be done. Again, not going to go into details. The main important part here is that we actually, after that, came up with recommendations and remediation, how to address that. And it was actually quite easy, I would say. The idea was to implement the certificate-based authentication for HVAC and basically not use this pre-shared key anymore. So it was realistic and it was done by the company afterwards. Another recommendation that we gave to consider not connecting the Wi-Fi network to HVAC. That was not really reasonable just due to the fact how the system was organized, but due to the fact that they implemented the separate way of authentication, it was still way more secure and all those threats which are present were addressed. The second part, the industrial automation system network. What we did discover was the insecure administration. I think for people who work in IT and OT domains, they will be really scared by this single flat network. And the idea was that we also identified that the main network equipment was located in, well, secure way, but at the same time, there were some network ports in the ship. So you as a passenger walking around can plug in and be already on the network. And there was the last scary part for people who know cybersecurity, they even had the telnet port being open. Again, a couple of threads there. The idea was that basically due to the fact that you could plug in to that network, you can read all the traffic. There's a lot of sensitive information there because this network is used for the shops on board of the ship. So people paying for some things, so their credit data was transferred within that network. So an attacker being able to connect, which was quite realistic, could eavesdrop to all this information. And again, well, we're not only talking about threats, we are also talking about recommendations. Obviously, the first recommendation that we gave was disable the telnet port, please. Don't use HTTP, at least introduce HTTPS. Also, make sure that all these network ports are not available for the passengers. Just use physical measures to protect it, and also implement the encryption, for example, TLS 1.3. Last part that I'm going to talk about is a breach network. And this is also something that is quite scary. All the ships right now, they have this ECDIS system, which is basically electronic chart display information system, and it's used for the nautical navigation that complies with International Maritime Organization regulations, and you need to update it. There are two ways to do that. You either connect it to the internet or to the cloud background, or you receive it through a USB stick. Both of those options are not really secure. So I'm not going to go into details. After that, we would like to always recommend to follow up with the penetration testing. That's what we did for this scenario as well. I already mentioned them before. And then that was actually the last slide that I wanted to show you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for this presentation and the details that you gave. Very quickly, the industry. Let's start from this point of view. Ecosystem is a complex ecosystem. Historically, it's a traditional company. A traditional ecosystem. At the same time, technology, cyber threats, cost, impact, not only to the company itself, but to the entire supply chain that we experience with the COVID pandemic or accident like in the Suez Canal, are considerable and can escalate very quickly. What we would recommend, or we would like to ask you to consider, is these regulations are there to give a direction, but cyber threats are not just waiting for regulation. They require you to engage in a journey where your own company, the ecosystem, your partners are going to actually have to integrate a new way of functioning. By starting a journey together with us at Secura and Bureau Veritas, what we aim for is to contribute in the way that your company is going to be functioning today, but mostly tomorrow, and tomorrow when you are under threats. So from that point of view, you saw the type of damages that Anna introduced us to early in the presentation. You saw the financial consequences, and you also can understand that the complexity of your environment requires a serious thinking about how to prepare yourself for the future. At Secura and Bureau Veritas, we have been working with companies within your industry, and with them we learn what are the consequences of the way that you function, you plan, and you deploy your services to your customers. Cyber threats are a clear and present danger. So it is not about if, it's about how fast you are actually going to take the decision to start this journey. Our experience across multiple geographies and different types of threats have proven to give support to companies and position themselves against competition, but mostly in protection of themselves, their clients, and their partners. So you have questions, don't hesitate. Find us on the web, find us on LinkedIn and different types of social media where you can pose your question. Experts like Anna will be more than glad to provide you with information. Mostly take the decision to engage yourself. Next year is coming fast. Most of these regulations are there to give a direction, but your decision is going to determine how quickly you will be ready for them. Yeah, so the regulation UN 26 and 27, to whom does it apply?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that E26 and E27 indeed only apply for the new vessels that's been commissioned from 2024. So as soon as you start building the ship from 2024, that's from the very beginning of your building process, you need to consider cybersecurity to be in place. But IMO resolution, the one which is talking about cybersecurity risk management system, is applicable for all vessels, the ones which are already in use as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating. You will find this webinar on our website, together with all the information on how to reach out. And we look forward to engage with you for further details. Thank you.
Thanks.